How do you create a culture where people can openly disagree with you? Find out today on the art and science of difficult conversations. Welcome to the art and science of difficult conversations, where we believe when you communicate better, you live better. As always, I'm Chris, one of your co-hosts, and I believe in ending accidental leadership. And I'm joined with Lucy of Mindfittery.
And I believe in communicating from our highest self rather than from our survival part of self.
There's nothing like conflict or hard conversations, like creating a culture where people will push back against you, but not just in any kind of way, not in an aggressive way, but in a generous and kind way. So today we're happy to have Kristina Joy Carlson, the founder and author of the best-selling book, Outrageous Kindness. And she's passionate about generosity and kindness in our professional and personal lives. Kristina, thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. And I so admire the work that you're both doing around communication, because it's something we all need to get better at.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we're looking forward to learning from you. And I feel like we always learn a lot from our guests. Talk to us about how you got to this point of working or with culture, working with communication, and especially this idea of conflict and feedback.
Yeah, well, I've spent most of my career working in the space of fundraising and philanthropy and trying to help organizations and people really connect around their shared values to get the kinds of resources needed to help make positive change in the world. And I've worked with a lot of founders. I've worked with a lot of high-powered CEOs, some heads of state, elite athletes, and I have seen over and over again how difficult it is for the people around them to feel like their voices are needed, their voices are heard. And I also think in this day and age that we've almost created a culture of fear about really communicating what we think, what we value, because there's so much animosity and polarization that leads us to try to stay in our own lane, because we don't want to get canceled or, whatever. So there's a lot of that we know we can address just by helping to grow this, as we say, mindset of outrageous kindness.
Yeah. Were you personally always comfortable with this idea of conflict and disagreement?
Well, I have certainly been pretty fearless most of my life. That's not to say that, the more I got into leading teams and leading people, that I didn't have to, learn by experience a lot. And sometimes, what they say about that, you learn more from bad experiences than you do the good ones. So, I've certainly had to learn, how you do approach more difficult conversations. But, in my career, I've walked into places where I was the youngest person in the room. I've walked into places where I was the only woman in the room. And so I had very early the opportunity to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that helps. Again, there's so much in our environment today that wants people to kind of stay siloed and disconnected from one another. And I don't think that helps. I don't think that helps in terms of people growing their communication skills, especially around things where we don't agree, right? Where we do have that difficulty in finding common ground.
So where do you think that internal courage came from for you? Was it the way you were brought up? Was it different experiences you've had in life that made you just feel that internal courage to just speak up all the time?
I would say a couple of things. One, yeah, my mother was very much, speak your mind, speak your mind. My dad was definitely a girl dad. He had 3 daughters and 1 son, and very much about you can do anything as long as it doesn't cost me a lot of money. Kind of thing. And then I would also say, and I've had the pleasure of working with, again, a lot of elite athletes, women, who were at the forefront of, making athletics more available for all of us. And I will say there is power in sports to build confidence, and whether it's teaching your kid to, hit a ball or play the piano or or find their thing. I think there's a lot of confidence that gets built in that type of an activity. And I grew up, playing sports and finding that, there were things that I could do that were powerful and strong, and that was very much a part of me building that confidence over time.
That's awesome. And so you mentioned working across all these kind of large and small and medium sized industries. And I think most people, popular culture at least, understands intellectually the idea of yes men and having a team that just yeses you is not great. But from what your work, what have you seen? What is it actually costing organizations when people are just all agreeing no matter what?
Well, I talk a lot about the culture of assumptions.
Mm.
So many teams, so many organizations build up this culture of assumptions where they think they know what the customer wants. They think they know what strategies will work before they've tested other ones. I've seen this a lot in fundraising, in the world of philanthropy in which I work, where teams of fundraisers will make all kinds of assumptions about who their contributors are, who their donors are, and without proofing it. I sat in a board meeting a few months back where the COO of an organization who was very passionate and powerful within the organization he basically said at a board meeting, well, I think our donors are already giving all that they can. It would be
Mm.
wrong to ask them for anything more. And I promise you, about 90% of the people in the room wouldn't argue with him because he's the
Mm.
COO. He knows. And yet, when I asked to see data to prove that point, how do we know they're doing all they can? Oh, I just know,
Yeah.
So what's it costing them? Tremendous potential to better engage people in their cause, to better raise money, to grow more generosity for what they're trying to do. So we see this culture of assumptions get in the way of teams and outcomes and revenue and profit and just that, oh well, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Well, maybe there's a better way and maybe we should be exploring it. So that's some of what I've seen.
Mm. I mean, in those situations, I've seen leaders perfunctorily just ask any other thoughts, any other disagreements. But it's not like a true invitation, right? It's like a fake
No.
invitation. Like, do you want to disagree with me?
Right. Yeah. Now that I've put you on the spot and I've already told you what I think, yeah, argue with me. Yeah, that doesn't go well, does it?
And that sounds like the leader was lucky to have you, who is courageous.
Oh, I'm not sure he appreciated it at that moment anyway.
Yes.
But eventually.
Later on,
yes.
eventually. So good for you to
Uh-huh.
have that courage and speak up.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of people don't have that courage. Have you noticed, have you been on teams that maybe you noticed that maybe your team was not sharing the truth?
Well, the truth. Ooh, that's quite a word there.
Or their own thoughts, let's say.
Well, I will just say this. I think in this day and age, you really have to work hard to get people to share their thoughts and to give their feedback in a way that can be constructive, in a way that can be productive. Yes, I want to hear everybody's opinion, but I don't want to just hear opinions. I want to know that, what you're sharing is based in fact, or it's based in some kind of data, or it's based in your experience, which may be unique, to the conversation. I want to know that because there's enough
Hmm.
of people just yelling opinions at each other. In fact, I think there's some kind of meme about, opinion has replaced fact uh, in many cases, right? So, building a discipline around, really exploring different sources of perspective, different sources of information, different sources of data before forming decisions. It's a muscle. It's something you've got to work hard to do for sure.
How can leaders know, though, if whether their team genuinely doesn't have anything to disagree with them. Maybe the team really does think this is the best option versus the team just doesn't want to. Are there any kind of signs that you look for or you teach leaders to think about to distinguish between them?
Well, I think, first of all, stagnant results. If performance has just been sitting in the same place forever, if there's been no innovative ideas developed, in the last year, with nobody's bringing you, solutions, right? To me, those are all indications that maybe, you haven't built a culture of inquiry and innovation and openness. So those are things we look at when we're asked sometimes to come in and help do training. Of teams, I always want to go, well, what is it we're trying to accomplish with this training? And oftentimes you'll find out, well, they've just been stuck going through the same motions over and over and over again. To me, again, that sounds like the team has decided they're just doing what you tell them to do, right? They're just waiting for you to tell them what to do. Or, you'll hear attitudes like, well, that's what they're measuring me on. So that's what I'm doing. And that's another area we look at is, what are those KPIs? What are those metrics that you're using to evaluate performance? And, are they really advancing or are they just creating work? We see that a lot where, the metrics themselves just become, a work among in and among themselves. So, yeah.
You made a really important distinction. I think that it's important for leaders that when they're listening to this, they should think about is because I think a lot of leaders have that founder syndrome, especially if they've been in that process, right? Like, I need to be the one to create the ideas, or I need to create the ideas and set the direction, set the vision. Whereas you're saying you need to create the environment where your team is bringing the solutions and the ideas to you, and you're not just necessarily the bottleneck anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I started Outrageous Kindness, I told the little team that I got together, I was like, look, we want to reach 1 million people with the message of outrageous kindness. How do we do that? What are your ideas? What would we, what would we do to approach that goal? I don't have all the ideas. I don't want to have all the ideas. I mean, I have purposely brought people on my team who are 23 years old and 63 years old and, come from different backgrounds so that they can, give me perspectives that I may not have, myself. So I think that, as you look at, what does it mean to be a leader, in today's environment, it's, first of all, acknowledging you don't want to have all the answers, right? That's a heavy burden because then everybody's waiting on you. And that impacts, you talk about the cost, right, of not having a culture that's more free flowing communication. It's lack of scalability. When it's all dependent on you, it's all sitting on you to make the decision and waiting for everybody to say yes. There's only so much growth you're going to get.
Yeah. It reminds me of this, a CEO I'm working with currently who, prior to me working with him, they had spent like hundreds of thousands of dollars working with different consultants to create software, to create like a platform for vendors or something. And he told his IT team, this is the problem. And they created a solution in 2 days. That took
wow.
multiple years, hundreds of thousands of dollars that consultants couldn't do.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. We find over and over again that typically the people closest to an issue are going to have some of the best ideas around how to solve it. We saw that with a project we did with a large NGO, a nonprofit global organization that was working in the humanitarian space, when they really embraced going into communities and involving the people in those communities and helping to develop the solutions, right, to address the poverty or the lack of access to education. Their impact just expanded. It accelerated because they had workable solutions that had been built in partnership with the people who were living, in the issues.
Two questions are coming up for me as I'm hearing you. You've mentioned previously when leaders are thinking that I have to solve it or I have to know everything, I should be the one with the ideas. And it sounds like that creates that disconnect from people and maybe continues that culture of people are not bringing the ideas. What are some of other mindsets or ideas that people have that are limiting the creativity and performance of their teams?
Yeah, so I don't know if now's the right time, but I think it helps kind of frame the conversation. So we say outrageous kindness is a mindset, a method, and a movement. And the method is what we call the kind method, KIND. And every letter stands for something, of course. And the N is, or the K is no more. You've got to commit to learning. You've got to commit to creating an environment where you're hearing, as I've said already, different perspectives, where you're looking for different data. You're just not receiving the same things all the time. So that K, knowing more. The second is I, impact. What are you trying to accomplish? You know, teams win when they know what they're trying to win, what the goal is, and how are we communicating that. The N is navigate. And I think this is where a lot of leaders fall apart. Navigate is, you know, I don't know anyone who gets up every day and it goes exactly the way they planned, right? I mean, stuff happens. I have a dear friend who owns a restaurant, and a day doesn't go by that somebody doesn't call in sick or there's a problem with some order or food or whatever. And you have to learn, you know, how you navigate those moments. And I think those are the times when leaders really get pushed, right? To how open are you? And what are you modeling in those moments? I tell people all the time, you know, if you want your kids to eat broccoli, you have to eat broccoli. If you want your teams to be good at communicating, dealing with challenges, dealing with crisis, being open in their communication, guess what you have to do? You have to model that. So when someone brings you bad news, right, how you react in that moment will set a tone for so many things. If you receive it, you ask questions, you process it instead of losing your cool. You know, it does so much for your team and your culture. And then the D is deliver. You know, we've got to, right, produce results and not, we can't spend all our time talking about how we're going to talk with each other. We ultimately have to, you know, make profit, raise money, make, you know, reach our goals, be accountable to our stockholders, whatever it may be. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's how I approach all of this, is within the framework of the kind method.
I love that. That was my next question. So you answered kind of both of them.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
I believe you also said outrageous kindness. What's it outrageous about?
Yeah, well, so it's outrageous because it is it's a mindset. It is every day. It's not just when we feel like it, right? And I think the other outrageous part about it is it says that we honor that everyone has value, that everyone has something to bring to the table, whatever that table might be, and that your, you know, act of kindness is just honoring that. In fact, I tell people all the time, I said, one of the, you know, kindest things you can do is ask someone their opinion and then really listen to what they say. Really listen. And appreciate it, and not sit there and try to, you know, what's my argument or whatever. Just try to appreciate their perspective and listen to what they have to say. And that's not how most people look at kindness. You know, kindness is usually about me coming in, you know, and coming to the rescue or sharing something that I don't, you know, feel like is difficult to share.
I think what's coming up for me is also the leaders, some leaders that I work with, they get their 360 reviews and they're surprised.
Uh-huh. Yes. Yes, they are.
And oftentimes they say, but I am just trying to get things done. I am focused on the results. It's not important that people like me. I just want to get things done.
Yeah.
How would you talk to
Well,
them about the concept of
yeah,
kindness?
so I get that though, right? That's my job is to get things done. But what if you could get more done?
Mm.
If you were kind. I read a stat the other day, and it was from the Human Resources Organization. They found that in the United States alone, $2 billion a day is lost to uncivil behavior at work.
Wow.
$2 billion a day. So, what does that mean? Well, so and so was rude to me, and so I spent the next 30 minutes moaning about it to my colleague, right? Or I had a bad interaction with a customer, and so now I got to mope and grope about it for the next, hour and a half. I don't know, but there's loss of productivity in those kinds of environments. And I think that's the biggest thing for leaders who are all about, well, it doesn't matter because I'm just about results. I was like, well, is it? Are you really getting all the results you can? Or are you losing so much productivity because behind your back, they're moaning and groaning? Or the other thing the study found is some of them aren't coming to work. They're calling in sick. They're taking personal time. They just don't want to be there with you. And so if you're really about results, right, that practice of outrageous kindness, the kind method, and eliminating the drag on productivity that uncivil behavior creates is going to boost your results, right?
Makes sense. And it sounds like also there needs to be part of self-leadership and self-regulation. As
Oh,
you
that's
mentioned, answer from
that,
kindness.
oh, I mean, that's the biggest part. And I write about this in my book about how, there's a reason on the airplanes they say put your own oxygen mask on first before you help others. If you're not being kind to yourself, if you're not in a place where you have the energy and really the ability to step back in tough times, and see things objectively, it's going to put a drain on your team's productivity. And so many founders, so many entrepreneurs, and I've been one myself many times. You just think you've got to work 24/7 and 80 hours a week, and you get burnt out, and then you're not nearly as productive. Your teams aren't as productive as they would be otherwise.
What are some of your practices throughout the year that help you stay calm and self-regulated?
That's such a great question, because I had an experience just about 3 weeks ago where now I live in Oxford, Mississippi, which is the home of the Ole Miss Rebels. And I'm in football country. I am college football country, for sure. And we have an iconic tailgating experience here in what's called the Grove. And I was standing in the Grove a few weeks ago, and I was standing somewhere that a woman didn't like where I was standing. And she came over and just unleashed so much hostility on me. I mean, she was not happy with where I was standing. And I just looked at her and I said, okay, I'll move. And she didn't know what to do. She just kept like screaming. I'm like, no, it's fine. I'm going to move. And people, oh, kindness is soft. Kindness is this. I'm like, no, it is a powerful and disruptive force. When you can practice being in a space where someone's angry, and I travel a lot for work, and airports, people are losing their minds constantly.
Yep.
And so I try to get my head on straight in the morning about what's important. And that's that I in the kind method, the impact, staying connected to your purpose, what you're trying to do. And I think I already mentioned, I want to get 1 million people practicing outrageous kindness. So I know, like, my impact is, first of all, I've got to eat the broccoli. I've got to do that myself. And I think it's so important that you start each day remembering your purpose, what it is you're trying to accomplish, whatever it is. And, staying connected to that is so important. I tell people who, especially if they're in sales or fundraising, which is what I spend most of my time helping to do, if there's not a story in your heart, something you want to share that you're passionate about, before you get going doing anything else, go get that. Go get that.
Let's get down to brass tacks, Kristina.
All right,
Chris.
Chris.
Let's say you got a leader. Let's say you got a leader that's listening to this, or just come to the realization, I need my team to start disagreeing productively with me, either in person, in one-on-one, and or in a team setting. How can they start? How can they turn things around if they haven't had that before?
Well, I think I start with a couple of things. One,
All right, that's the end of part 1 of our interview with Kristina. Stay tuned till next week when we talk to her and even have a role play to see how it all plays out.